Synapse Sliver, Seedborn Muse, Brood Sliver. These are just a few of the impactful EDH cards from Magic's 28th expansion, Legions.
Sliver Overlord, Decree of Silence, and recently Pemin's Aura in CEDH. These are just a few of the impactful cards that came out of Magic the Gathering's 29th expansion, Scourge.
But those aren't the cards we're talking about today. No, today we are talking about the sleeper picks. Those commander cards that fly under the radar and may be just a few dollars, but we still think they're strong.
This is Commander Sleeper Series for Legions and Scourge. The video starts right now.
Special thanks to our Patreon supporters who power our channel. Check out our Patreon for monthly giveaways, exclusive content, and even a starring role in our fan fight series. Link in the description below.
Hello and welcome to the day.
Thank you for spending your time with us.
I'm Jake.
I'm Joel. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. We are going to talk about the sleepers, the commander sleepers for Legions and Scourge in this video. But first, if you would, go down there and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out.
It's the best way to support the channel with just the click of a button. Now, what you need to know about Legions and Scourge are these are both two very small sets with very narrow directions as far as how they were designed.
That's correct.
Legions is the very first set that was all creatures. A little bit lackluster if you know anything about the Commander Sleeper series. You know that we really thrive on enchantments and artifacts as they're sticky, they're hard to get rid of, and when they're only a couple bucks, and even if they have a niche use, they're still really impactful in EDH. It just made the most sense for us because both of these sets were kind of lackluster to stick them together rather than make a video for each of them.
That's exactly right. There's only maybe 3 to 4 cards that we think actually have some viability. We were through the first list, through the first expansion of planning this episode, and Jake was like, I really feel like we're starting to stretch on some of these cards. Let's just combine this with the next set. On top of everything that Jake said, this set was mostly tribal, and it also featured the mechanic morph, and the mechanic morph is very narrow. Jake gave you a thumbs down.
Opinion.
But in Commander, it's not the most super viable mechanic outside of the specific commander that was designed for it. And so being a tribal set that features morph very heavily, it's hard to find cards that we think actually will have playability and be somewhat casually competitive. Let's jump over into these cards. So, we are going to start with Legions, the 28th expansion in the history of MTG, our all-creature set, like Jake said. And we're going to start with Beacon of Destiny. This is one of my picks. 1 white, 1 other for a cleric. That's a 1/3. You tap it to say the next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, that damage is dealt to Beacon of Destiny instead. So I see this as you get to dodge one big thing. You get to dodge one big creature attack on like a Voltroned up Prosh or something crazy. Or you get to maybe dodge some big X spell, a lot of damage that's coming right at your face. So you get to do it once, or you could possibly suit this card up with something like Darksteel Plate and make it this kind of, 1-2 combo of all the damage every time this thing is untapped. All the damage from one source just hits it and kind of bounces off,
And white in EDH is good for artifacts, so it's not outside of the realm of possibility that this card could make itself into a nice artifact build. I do agree that it's going to thrive the most if you could get a Darksteel Plate on it. The only reason the card made it onto the list is because of that 3 toughness. So often in EDH, it's really easy to kill creatures, and so for a creature to make it into the Commander Sleeper series, it really does take being an extremely impactful card, or it needs to be from a set like Legions, where it's really just like, this is one of the shining stars out of the set.
Yeah.
Outside of the cards that we know that are already established, which are all of the slivers that Joel talked about. Glow Rider here, 1 white, 2 other, for a 2/1, another creature here, but non-creature spells cost 1 more to play, so it is a stacks card. So this card very specific and narrow, but it is a very popular archetype. Stacks is like resource denial. Think of cards like Propaganda, Smothering Tithe, Smokestack. There's a lot of really, really good stacks cards, and this is a nice creature to just kind of like shove into that kind of strategy. It kind of puts redundancy on a stick, which is how Joel described it.
Yeah, exactly. Redundancy is the name of the game with this card. I just think this could be a good addition to strategies like that. Dreamborn Muse is up next. 2 blue, 2 other for a 2/2 spirit. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player puts the top X cards from his or her library into their graveyard, where X is the number of cards in their hand. This is a piece of a mill deck to me.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I play a lot of mill. I really like the way, you can play around it. You can have the Everflowing Chalice, or not the Everflowing Chalice, the Elixir of Immortality in your deck. You could have different ways to shuffle your library back in. This is a nice card where if you can protect it, it's really going to put all of your opponents kind of on a clock, in putting them in a position where they need to figure out, like, what do we do here versus the Dreamborn Muse. And it is a creature, again, it's something that's easy to answer, but if you are able to, flicker this with like a Deadeye Navigator whenever somebody tries to remove it, if you're able to protect it with any kind of hexproof or anything like that, this card can really get out of hand really quick. And again, very niche use, but it is an important use, and it is a really important strategy when we have cards like Bruvac come out of Jumpstart, which are just putting mill on the map as far as EDH goes. Now we have a card that's just like every mill spell we do is double. I mean, it's a pretty strong card, so that's why it's on the list.
Yeah, absolutely right. Everybody always talks about, Seedborn and Graveborn Muse as kind of the top two from this cycle, but I really do like Dreamborn Muse as well. So those are the cards that we found in Legions that were wide enough, he said about a mill card and a non-creature stacks card, that were wide enough to maybe include in multiple types of decks, or just, be competitive in the strategies that you would build those cards into. We're into Scourge now. Lethal Vapors is up first.
There's some enchantments here. There's whoa.
This is I think this card represents everything that Jake likes about MTG. 2 black, 2 other, 4 an enchantment, so we're already good on his radar. Whenever a creature comes into play, destroy it. Oh my god, Jake is halfway there. 0 to destroy Lethal Vapors. You may skip, or you have to skip your next turn, and any player may play this ability. I love this, like, this doesn't affect me, this affects you, which opponents are going to be like, all right, I'll take the hit and just destroy it because, we're both a creature deck, but you've got to do this. I love the politics that this brings into play. I was
just about to say that. I love it from a politics standpoint. And the thing is when you play this in something like Muldrotha, and it's a kind of repeatable effect that you can get back, you have all of your opponents now, and granted, Muldrotha, you're going to have creatures and stuff, so it's kind of like a non-bow there. But just saying, like, from a political standpoint, so maybe Muldrotha is actually a bad choice. It's a bad example. But just saying, it is a really cool political card, and it's one of those cards that just hovers around, like 35 cents, like $1. It's a very, very, very low price. And you may look at it and go, well, any player can just skip their next turn. And I think if you play this card at the right time, if you play it in a really important moment, it does become difficult for people to figure out, is it really advantageous for me for my next turn to destroy this card and take a turn off. And a lot of people, in EDH, a lot of these decks get out of hand really quick, and people cannot afford to take that turn off.
Yeah, absolutely. I bet that this card has never become a super, super powerful card because it gives players options, and in general, you want to try to avoid that in your building. Cards may be fun, but they're going to be definitely powered down. If your opponent can look at your situation, decide which one would be most advantageous to you, and then pick the other, that's something you mostly want to avoid. But I still think that Lethal Vapors has a lot of potential.
Yes. Now let's go ahead and talk about this next card, 1 green, 3 other for Upwelling. Another enchantment. Mana pools don't empty at end of phases or turns. So it does affect everybody. But again, another group hug kind of political card. And if you're in a 2-headed giant kind of situation, you might be able to work something out with your partner. I think there's a lot of shenanigans that can go on with this card, especially at such a low price point. And if I'm correct, this is like 1 of 2 printings, maybe 1 printing.
Yeah, 1 of 2, if I'm not mistaken. Things I like about this card. It features one of my favorite MTG characters in Kamal. It features one of my favorite MTG storylines in the Mirari. And you've got a little MTG history flavor on here where in parentheses it says, this effect stops mana burn. That's hilarious to me. And so I am just I am generally in love with this card. I think it's so cool. It's taking that, we've seen mana pools don't empty at the end of phases or turns on creatures and cards like this in the future that do much more than just the 4 mana enchantment here does. However, for the flavor and for redundancy of the effect, I think that Upwelling is fantastic. Here's another enchantment. Jake, we did well on choosing enchantments for you in this set. Parallel.
I'm happy that we did, because in the beginning we had to start with some creatures and I didn't think I was going to make it through the video, but now we're here and we're doing great. Doing great things.
Parallel Thoughts is a 5 mana enchantment, 2 blue, 3 other. When it comes into play, search your library for 7 cards, remove them from the game in a face down pile and shuffle that face down pile. Then you shuffle your library. If you would draw a card, you may instead put the top card of your tiny 7 card shuffled pile into your hand instead of drawing the card. So you can go and search up your 7 best pieces, your combo pieces or your win the game cards, whatever you need to go search up. And then just randomly, instead of drawing off the top, you can be like, all right, I hope I get card X this time. And you're like, all right, nope, well, I got another good one because I chose the 7 that were in there.
Or, a different direction. You go, I have 2 of my big important pieces and I need some velocity. I'm going to go into my deck and I'm going to grab every freaking draw spell that I have.
Right.
And now every single time on my turn, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to be like, all right, and here's a premium draw spell and we're drawing cards and now we're just digging through. I think honestly, out of this whole list, the now 3 or 4 times that I've read this card ever in my life, I actually think that this is the card that I might be the most excited about out of this entire list. I think that there is a lot of heat here, and I think the price point of this card doesn't really reflect the amount of heat that is actually the potential that this card has, because there is, go grab all of my threats, go grab all of my draw spells, go grab all of my removal. I need a premium removal. I need all of my
board
my
wipes.
Control spells.
Go draw 7 board wipes, and then every time you need a board wipe, just draw from your little pile.
Exactly. So that's the kind of thing that you can do with this card, and I think that's the kind of thing that people aren't really thinking about. 5 in EDH, in CEDH, that's a lot, but in EDH, 5 is a very reasonable cost for a spell. You put this in like a blue-green black deck where you're like ramping and doing all sorts of crazy shenanigans. I think that this card can really thrive, and that's one of the things that I really love about this series, and I'm happy that we do it, is because it gives us as creators, as people that are looking for cards to bring to you, it lets us find old hidden gems that we would have otherwise never in a million years thought about.
I'll tell you, there does exist with this card a little potential for annoyance. When you run like Demonic Tutor or any of the one-off tutors, generally what you're going for. You're like, okay, I'm either going to go get a board wipe or a targeted removal or my other combo piece or whatever. What you're after. The amount of times that we've played with anybody in our play groups where like a 2-card tutor went off and we all had to sit there for half an hour and go like take a break, go watch a sitcom, go grab a water because that person couldn't decide which 2 cards. Imagine those people trying to go find 7 freaking cards out of their deck without really a strategy. Just be like, I'm going to take this one and this one and this one. It does exist that, you need to maybe have a plan going into running that card.
For sure. And it's just funny. I just think the card is really, really good and really strong. And I want to tinker with it because I think there's some potential there. Primitive Etchings, 2 green, 2 other for another enchantment. Do you like enchantments? Because we're talking about enchantments now. Reveal the first card you draw each turn. Whenever you reveal a creature card this way, draw a card. It's just velocity. So if you're running a lot of creatures, if you have a Sensei's Divining Top, if you have some sort of way of scrying,
right?
Just set it up so that your creatures end up on top, reveal them to your opponents. It's a small price to pay, for keeping your hand full, having all of those answers.
Absolutely.
Draw the creatures and then draw another card. So pretty good.
I think it's interesting that this is an enchantment, so it satisfies you, but it's an enchantment that needs to be in a creature-based deck, so it's absolutely the opposite of what you actually want an enchantment to do. Fun juxtaposition there.
I've been playing the game long enough that I know the importance of creatures.
Sure.
I understand where you're coming from.
This card does represent exactly what Jake said, which is velocity in a deck type that needs it. You can't build a creature strategy that doesn't want to keep putting creatures on the board, most likely. And when you do that, you're opening yourself up to board wipe. And if you don't have any cards in your hand to rebuild after that, you can really be put back and just end up sitting there for the whole match. So cards like this are the kind that will keep your hand full on top of your other, card draw, like Great Henge, or like any number of creature comes into play, draw a card, cast a creature spell, draw a card, stuff like that. 4 and 3 blue for the craziest card ever. Here we go. When it comes into play, remove all creatures you control from the game. Then put that many 5/5 red dragon creature tokens with flying into play. When Day of the Dragons leaves play, sacrifice all dragons you control. Then return the removed cards to play under your control. So this is an interesting card. You can come at it from a couple of different ways here. Having a bunch of 1/1 tokens on the battlefield obviously is kind of the way to go with this. Then you can turn them all into 5/5s. However, if you have a bunch of card-based creatures on the battlefield and then you cast this, you've also got kind of board wipe protection built in. Obviously, when Day of the Dragons leaves, you got to sack all your dragons and then your cards come back. But if you get board wiped and all your dragons die to that, all you got to do is figure out how to destroy Day of the Dragons, and your creatures will all come back to the battlefield.
Or just bounce it.
Or just something. Exactly. How it just has to leave play. And so it's got some versatility built in there where it's a little board wipe protection, a little, almost a vault for all your creatures that are on the battlefield to come into play. Obviously, it's not going to return token creatures to play, and so that strategy doesn't really work if you want to go I've got a ton of 0/1 plants, for instance, like I've built into some 3-way videos. Day of the Dragons, and all my plants become 5/5 dragons, have something giving them all haste or whatever, and then, you're just going nuts.
That's right. And you may be saying, Joel, Day of the Dragons, this was reprinted in Iconic Masters. It was printed in a Commander product. What you're looking at here is the first original printing of the card. So if that's the kind of thing that interests you as a collector, if you really do like that old border, this is going to be the only option of the card. But you are looking at a card that's easily like a 50 cent to $1 card right now. It's very casual. I'm not going to tell you to put this in any kind of competitive EDH build. It's a big, splashy 7-cost enchantment that does a really fun effect. But again, it's a casual card. But if it's the kind of thing you're into, if it's something that you don't know, you might want to pick it up. And then we have Final Punishment 2 black, 3 other for a sorcery. Target player loses life equal to damage already dealt to him or her this turn. So it's just kind of a big punch in the face. It's just like a big 5-cost sorcery. A lot of the time, sorceries aren't really going to pop up in the Commander Sleeper series. But if you are playing alongside a lot of damage, it's just kind of a sneaky spell to get in there and get the lethal blow on an opponent. I actually really like it. It's a little bit expensive. I think in some matchups it might be a dead card, but if you are at the table and you're playing against, 3 or more opponents, I do think you're going to find a use for Final Punishment.
It's a huge burn spell, and it doesn't look like a burn spell necessarily, but loses life equal to the damage. So that means that it's only going to count damage dealt that turn. It's not going to count loss of life, and so, right. Cards like Exsanguinate don't really play well with it. But if you are running it in a black-red build, this would be the kind of card that can make a burn strategy viable in Commander. Burn strategies don't normally work in Commander if you're unfamiliar because they kind of burn out. They don't have, not to use a bad pun, but they just don't have the longevity and they don't have the quickness. You can't guarantee you're going to, 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop curve out without, by the time all of your opponents are on 5 mana, everybody being able to stifle your entire strategy. So if you can get 2 fire for half their life total and then you've got 5 mana left over, target player loses life equal to the damage already dealt to them, it can be a finisher,
Yeah, and this card is going to be viable if you are in 2-headed paired up with an opponent that's doing damage, or you can play it in like a black-red goblins. You know, I played black-red goblins, I played Wart. It was my very first EDH deck. So this is the kind of deck that I would, or the kind of card that I would put into that deck. You know, swing through with a bunch of goblins, and then in the second main, punch through for that extra damage, hopefully eliminate that opponent. There's a lot of potential here with this card, but it is, again, narrow and it depends on a good source of damage, otherwise kind of a dead card, and that's probably why the card is so inexpensive to this day. However, let's not overlook its niche use.
Absolutely. That does it for Legions and Scourge on the Commander Sleeper series. Let's close the book. Thanks everybody so much for watching. Like Jake said earlier in the video, this is one of our favorite series to do. You know, we have as much fun looking through old cards as anybody, and as much as I'm sure you do since you're watching the video. And it's just such an exciting thing to go through and find a card where I'm like, I never even knew this card existed. Jake, look at this thing. It replaces all your tokens with dragons.
I know, right? And if this is your first time watching the Commander Sleeper series, there's a whole bunch of other videos to check out, so make sure you check out the Commander Sleeper series playlist. I believe we started at Tempest, but we're going to go back and we're going to do lots and lots of sets. Make sure you're subscribed, and you can keep up with those videos as they are released.
That's right. If you want to support us further, we have a Patreon. The link is down in the description below. Other than that, I am tapped out, and we will catch you.
Until next time, we will catch
on
you. In the future. We'll see you in the future.
Bye.